Join us now to build the universal currency we've been waiting for.
So we are running a little bit behind the schedule, so maybe let's just get the next panel started. So the audience will have some time to ask questions as well. Yeah. So let's just get it started. Can we ask everyone to get seated, and we'll get the next panel discussion started. Get seated, please, everyone. Yeah.
Right, so we're about to start the second panel discussion. So this time we have Franklin from Pantera Capital, we have Daniel from Paradigm, we have Jack from NGC Ventures, Judy from DHVC, Maria from Electric Capital, and the topic is the state of DeFi from a VC perspective. Please take a seat. If you all could please take a seat. We still have plenty of spaces here. We're about to start in 1 minute. You all have plenty of time for discussions between yourselves afterwards. We still have time to mingle after the panel discussion and a couple of presentations. So if you could all please take a seat. If you do choose to engage in conversations at the back there, you feel free to do so, but just please keep it low. We still have quite a few seats here in the front if you'd like to listen to the panel discussion. All right. Thank you very much.
So thank you for the panelists for coming over. One mistake I have to correct. That's Ken from Electric Capital. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah. So there was one mistake just now during the introduction. That's Ken from Electric Capital. Maria will do a presentation later. So yeah. So let's just get started. So first, from an investor perspective, so do you want to describe a little bit about what's your perspective on the scope of DeFi? What exactly is DeFi from your point of view?
I guess I can start. Mike. Hey guys, I'm Ken from Electric. One of the things that we think about, our whole kind of investment thesis is sort of centered around programmable money. So even outside of DeFi and outside of Ethereum, we think that kind of the money use case is a great fit for crypto and blockchain. And so DeFi obviously is an interesting focus for us. In the very long term, what we kind of see is traditional financial systems that are structured on kind of legal contracts and human processes to control access and transactions between people. All those things should eventually transfer over to a software platform as long as that software platform can support the kinds of things that you need. And so DeFi is probably like the very, very early initial step of that. Obviously there's a long way to go and a lot of things to figure out. But in that sense, we think the scope actually is quite large.
I think there's two layers of DeFi definition. One is more comprehensive, as basically like Bitcoin and other coins which can reduce the friction in traditional financial institution or financial, which is equivalent for the financial instrument can be defined as DeFi. But in this panel, I think we are talking about the DeFi in a narrow definition. In my word, it's kind of things which can use, reduce the trust, centralized trust in the crypto world. In other words, it's kind of things which can reduce the centralized auditing if you want the transparency. Yeah.
So I think one thing that really excites me, I'm speaking from my own views here, not the fund, generally out there talking. One thing that excites me about DeFi is the ability for anyone to become, to practice something that right now you basically have to be a trader at JP Morgan to be able to construct some kind of new swaps. And as a result, I think it's actually, it turns out it's very creative work designing financial products. And or at least I think it's really fun, but it's not the kind of thing that most people get to do. So I think DeFi in part is about supplying these ingredients to the world just in order to get basically user-generated content. Let people try to figure out what they can do with it, and just try a million different things, most of which will be terrible, but some of which are really cool. And end up with things that the normal traditional financial system just wouldn't have come up with, not because they aren't smart or because these aren't good ideas, but just because they don't have as many people trying out crazy stuff, combining different building blocks on chain.
Hi everyone, this is Jack from MTC. So basically, from our strong point of view, we think there should be a broader vision. Instead of DeFi, we think it's crypto finance, which means could be centralized and decentralized in a way that we're the largest investor in the Asian largest crypto lending borrowing platform called PayPal Finance. They have currently 100 million outstanding loans. They operate as a centralized entity, basically providing resources to all the mining pools. They borrow money from this platform. So from this experience, we think there are a lot of things which DeFi can do, but from some standpoint, there's a lot of things, there are a lot of constraints which DeFi has. So we think crypto finance should be a better notion. And also there's another side about blockchain, which is blockchain data, which can be used for a lot of existing traditional financial infrastructure. So that's basically our point of view.
Hi, Franklin from Pantera Capital. For us, DeFi we really think of as the freedom of financial expression, right? And I think that includes everything that's already been said on the panel. But really, the context for us is when you look at the history of the information age and how being able to jump on YouTube basically took away power from newspaper publishers and broadcast networks for people to express themselves. We think that DeFi, programmable money, those are all concepts that will allow people to express their financial ideas, right? Where they want to create markets and assets that may not, be listed on centralized financial institutions today, or where they may not be able to access it in their particular jurisdiction. People can start doing that. They can express their trading strategies. They can express their insight into a marketplace where today there isn't one. So when we talk about the scope of DeFi, it's hard to say what's the beginning, what's the end. Maybe the beginning was Bitcoin, but the end, we really haven't seen.
So I guess just now, Jack actually touched a little bit about the different models for like DeFi or crypto finance. Because there's DeFi, there's also StemFi. Binance today announced they will do a lending product called like the StemFi platform. So basically, like there are all kinds of different investment themes in crypto. So what do you think in terms of like DeFi or StemFi or crypto finance? Is it like a major vertical, like one of the most important vertical for your investment dollars, or just one of the things, basically for the overall crypto investment?
Yeah, I think for us, DeFi is not a trend. It's not a fad, right? It's a pillar. And the journey of DeFi, I think, started when we all started looking at Bitcoin. And to me, this is just an extension of the original idea behind having a censorship-resistant, permissionless system for financial transactions. So to me, this is really just a maturing of that concept. Even though DeFi, for folks who have been in the space for a while, DeFi seems like a more recent narrative. To us, it's just putting a name on something that we've all been thinking about for a long time.
Yeah, so we basically explore crypto finance starting from last year before the notion of DeFi is created. We invested in this lending platform last May. They approached a lot of funds, but we did investment. People think we're very bold. But if you look at the financial history, everything, no matter what you finance, all start with borrowing and lending. Now we start with crypto borrowing and lending. Before having mortgage, we have corporate loans. So I think we are right at the first step. We have lending and borrowing. So that's why we invested in crypto lending and borrowing way from last year. And now people are kind of focused on it. And the next step is actually derivatives. So now you have lending and borrowing. Then people have to do something on top of this foundation, which is, do all sorts of derivatives on top of it. So this year we invest in Vega, which is decentralized derivative protocol. So you can see there are various building blocks which people move gradually towards. So as a fund, we need to see the clear trend. Seeing the correct trend using the way that analyzing what has happened in the financial history instead of just speculating and now just daydreaming and see what is going to be hot in the future. So there is a logic in the finance, no matter crypto or trading finance, which people follow the same pattern every single time.
So what's after derivatives based on my logic? Maybe audience here can start working on it.
For example, the most recent one is like mortgage. You have mortgages, and you have the Wall Street build a pipeline which you do trenching and do reading, and then you have MB assets pump up on the other side. So this is called massive production line in finance. But now in crypto, we have the first stage, which is crypto lending and borrowing, and we're sort of moving on to the derivatives. So I don't know, but we definitely haven't reached to a point which we can do massive production of financial product in crypto.
I think for DeFi investment, basically we'll focus on two designs. One is like how to lock the other token or their own token, which is like we call collateral or like underwriting assets in traditional finance. And the other thing is how to drive the liquidity on top of the underlying asset. If we simplify all the questions about DeFi product, especially like the lending product or derivative product, just focus on those both like the two designs. And I think like some of the current product, DeFi product, already created some liquidity in the current market.
So the thing I think about with your question is I think it's actually conflating two things. One is like what is DeFi as a use case for crypto, which I think it's like totally like playing to one of crypto's strengths. It's like obviously there's just this very fast adoption because it's doing this new logistically. I think from an investment perspective though, you have to ask a different question, which I think it hasn't really played out enough to really tell where the value of this stuff is coming from. If you're talking about open source contracts on Ethereum blockchain, like what prevents someone from coming in just making the same thing and tweaking their liquidation ratio, their bonding curve or whatever it is, and making a cheaper version of it and pulling everyone away. I think these are the kinds of questions that we tend to ask ourselves, and so whether it's a fee-based model or like a 0x type model, or maybe the future is like you just provide liquidity to Uniswap and take a fee that way, and everyone sort of gets to play evenly. I think that's the space of stuff from an investment perspective that like is not super clear yet, and that's the kind of stuff that we watch.
So do you feel there will be network effect that can be built on DeFi type of products?
I mean, yes. I think the short answer is yes. Like the thing that
for example, if you look at the traditional finance world for lending, there's so many different players. At the end of the day, it becomes like more like an even playground for everyone.
Right. So I mean, I think even look at something as basic as like I don't know, like Instant App sort of comes to mind. Or I think there was another one that I can't recall the name. There was another one that just came out a couple days ago, where the idea is just like moving your either your borrow or your lend across different venues automatically. You know, that kind of stuff. The barrier, at least today, for one product to integrate with another compound or DYDX in the background is so low compared to like if you think about two banks working with each other or like all the headaches that they would have to go through to do that. That at least as a technologist seems like, you know, should lead to a bunch of this network of like layers that all work together in a way that we've never seen before. Like a lot of you know what I tend to think about with DeFi is that a lot of, you know, especially in the space where we're kind of porting existing things in the financial space over, you know, there's this kind of efficiency argument. You know, you don't have to, someone doesn't have to review your loan application to give you a loan, you know, in person. But usually, what tends to happen in technology is that because that operation becomes so lightweight, so cheap, that now, you know, you can start to ask questions like, okay, what if you had like, you know, 1 billion people that would, you know, could approve loans for you? Like, what would the world look like then? Because that's what you essentially have on these platforms. How would you do things differently? And so I think that's the exciting part of all this. And you know, the products that take advantage of that sort of difference with the traditional system are the ones that are actually going to provide unique value. But then again, there's a question of how do they capture value as well. So.
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, like, there are different type of models. Just now, like, for example, in the previous panel, Coinless is more like a sandbox type of model. And like other project is more like focused on DeFi type of model. And they seem to have a little bit different user bases and the target. So in terms of investment, like when you look at these opportunities, I mean, do you feel like certain verticals have more growth potential than other verticals, or you just feel this is still early and it's still hard to make a call at this stage?
I can go first since I have the mic, but I think my answer would be it's still too early. I mean, there's sort of some money locked up in this right now, but compared to, you know, the traditional financial system, it's like rounding error basically. So you know, the fact that we're starting to see some of the primitives and starting to see some of the interesting combinations of those primitives, like it's cool, but like, you know, we're really looking for that kind of unique application of this stuff that the traditional system won't be able to do.
Well, I guess one related question is, when you look at these projects, how do you value them? Like, what's the model you guys use? And is there certain kind of methodologies you guys use to look at these projects?
For DeFi?
Yeah, or like for SemFi, or, I mean, for example, the way you look at it, is that like similar ways as looking at a traditional fintech startup, right? And then probably you will look at it certain ways, future revenue growth, things like that. But when you look at DeFi type of investment, a lot of times it's very hard to make that, like call that justifications, right? So how do you, I mean, like value these projects and decide whether you invest or not invest in certain projects?
For the fee model, so basically like it's also the same as the traditional fintech investment. Everything you need to link to the fee or transaction fee, like Ethereum, and they have the gas fee model, so you link to the gas fee or the DeFi. They like Meterup, it's very easy to the comparison. Fundamentally, I think we need to use the same methodology in the traditional investment, like fee model, revenue model. Yeah. No matter it's a security token or utility token, look at the Binance token. They use the revenue to buy back. Anyway, it's a way to deliver the profit to the token holders.
So I think it's easier for some investments than others, and so tokens that receive a fee that have some kind of rent on them. So MKR is probably the simplest example here. Is you can basically look at it from this kind of cash flow perspective, and then you're just making predictions about what are the fees going to be paid to MKR holders. There's another element of it, which is moneyness. which is basically the premium that something collects over your expectation of its future cash flow. And that's, I think it's a much harder thing to try to figure out. It's like valuing Bitcoin, for example, or valuing Ether itself. Maybe look at it a couple different ways. A huge percentage of the value of those assets we think is related to their moneyness, to monetary premium, rather than expected discounted cash flow. So valuing those much harder, but also very important, because to the extent assets are money, that's a very valuable thing to be.
Yeah, from the fund perspective, we think we're still not sure whether DeFi is going to be successful or not, because in the entire financial history, there are several instances where government actually gave freedom to the financial market. Like back in 1970s, we have borrowing banking, which means 363 rule. Basically, saving has 3% interest and borrowing has 6% interest. And at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, every bank needs to clear. So bank has been worked like this for more than 2 years. And all the bankers said it's too boring. So government said, here you go, we give you a chance to make it more interesting. So banks start to change their own savings rate and also interest rate on a lot of things, and just mess it up itself. So I'm still not, on the personal level, when I look at these things, I'm still not sure. Like back in, corporate, same thing for corporate loan, like JP Morgan created a risk model, and the government allowed other banks to use their model, but other banks use their model in the wrong way, so creates a lot of crisis. So whether having a government is a good thing or not is still an answer yet to be answered. But back to crypto finance, we think we have to look at their revenue model, right? Like the crypto lending business in China is so different here. Here we have a lot of traders that people borrow a lot of Bitcoin, and there's always more supply of stablecoin on the platform. But in Asia, crypto lending is a different story. You have mining pools, they need cash, so they borrow stablecoin, OTC into Chinese yuan, and prepaid electricity and purchase running machinery for mining. So there are different demand and supply for different cryptocurrency. But if you focus on regional demand and supply, if you know the market very well, there's no point to not invest in Chinese crypto lending borrowing from last year. But we know compound from last year as well, but we know it's not our strength. So it's a Bay Area project, and yeah, so there are a lot of elements which affect our investment, and it's still unclear.
Yeah, I would say the same. Valuation to us is still a huge challenge and a big question mark. For every kind of proposed valuation method, looking at fees, looking at discounted revenue models, there's always 10 or 20 caveats that come with it, right? If there is a fee model, first, assuming that they're providing a service that's actually valuable enough to charge a fee, can that fee be forked away? Is that fee the minimum fee necessary to ensure the security of the network? Or is a portion of that fee actually rent-seeking, in which case there's going to be an inevitable forking away from that because everything is going to fall to as close to zero as possible, right? If you look at value accrual, right? That's the big question that Ken was alluding to, right? Which is, what is the model if they're building an open source protocol or platform for them to actually capture value? Are they going to first build an underlying protocol and primitives, and then shift towards building some type of liquidity aggregation service that provides the best user experience to all people transacting on that network? And that's going to be their play. And if so, can they execute on that, right? There's just so many different dimensions, I think, when it comes to valuing a project that, it's still way too early to say what's the right metric or the right, one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah. So at least from the numbers we have seen so far, the StemFi model seems to, at least at this stage, be more valuable than the DeFi models. So from your perspective, what DeFi enables us that the traditional models or the StemFi models doesn't give us? And do you feel that basically will have enough growth to justify these DeFi projects to thrive?
Yeah, sure. I think the reason why we've seen a lot of CeFi or SenFi projects see more success than kind of the pure DeFi ones is because usability is so poor across the ecosystem, right? And a big part of usability for anyone who is a market participant is liquidity, right? So you need some type of centralization today in order to gather enough liquidity for a trader or any other kind of participant to actually have a good time and actually be able to, as I was saying before, express themselves, right? Express their financial idea freely and fluently, right? I think that may be temporary, right? That balance right now between CeFi and DeFi. And the reason I'd say that is because the permissionlessness of DeFi really means that the potential acceleration of new market creation can be so much faster than any single institution or company trying to do it themselves. And I think that's going to be the ultimate advantage.
Do you feel that's more like a regulatory play than actually?
Is it like regulatory arbitrage? The fact that people can create new markets?
Yeah, basically like because you are permissionless, you can work around them or like taking shortcuts in regulatory issues.
Yeah, I mean, there are some markets where that's true, right? Where because they're able to build something and ask for forgiveness later, they may find success, right? And they are just hoping that regulation will catch up and allow them to beg for forgiveness afterwards, right? I'm not sure if that's the right approach in the long term. But I think there are plenty of other plays where it's not so much regulatory arbitrage, it's more a reshaping of regulatory obligations, right? So, what we were talking about before in terms of smart contracts, being able to handle the exchange or the matching of counterparties, that changes your obligations as a company and as a team, right? It may mean that you're able to compete faster, and that's why you win. Right, and that I think is fair play.
Yeah, I think DeFi definitely has some advantage over centralized finance in some ways. So, for example, derivative. Now a lot of people trade on Big Macs and a lot of derivative tradings. But if you think about it, those tradings do nothing good to the protocol level, which means for protocol, we need some derivative for bandwidth, for hash power, which allow all the people working on the consensus level to find a way to hedge themselves, so that they can measure costs through those financial products. But if you use a centralized model, BitMax, you need to go to Hong Kong to back them to list a bandwidth for your project. That's basically impossible. So DeFi, decentralized derivative provides a way for those projects to hash something that centralized derivative platform will never want to list. Just like a derivative for hash power and bandwidth, that's basically impossible to do for a centralized derivative.
So I think there's some truth to the idea that a lot of it is regulatory arbitrage, although I would never say that on stage. I used to be a lawyer, actually, a securities lawyer, and when the ICO boom happened in 2017, a lot of lawyers correctly identified that most of these sales seem to be unregistered offerings of securities. Tended to have a decent amount of fraud going on, and the SEC ultimately did crack down on it. But I think it's probably to say that this sort of boom in decentralized finance is all about, or even largely about regulatory arbitrage, is kind of like thinking back in the day that YouTube was primarily about copyright infringement, which was the theory at the time about YouTube. With people saying this is primarily a business to be able to post TV episodes, and now copyright infringement on YouTube is practically non-existent. But it did spur this user-generated content kind of innovative boom that beforehand you probably just wouldn't have been able to even conceive of. So that's where I think Even that comes out in part probably from the fact that early on people could post these things that maybe use copyright somewhat liberally. But as people start to develop more and more things that maybe do comply or evade regulatory requirements, and as regulations kind of like shape and change and figure out how to work with these new protocols and like how to treat them properly rather than treating them like they're broker dealers or like something that they're not. I think we'll see all kinds of weird new shit that the regulators would never have been able to predict.
Also, just echo Dan's thoughts. I think the really interesting fireworks are going to happen when something comes out that doesn't look like something that exists today, and people will just be like, "What? How do we even think about this thing?" Yeah, I mean, YouTube, in the same way that YouTube sort of, if you think about video pre-YouTube, there were so many sort of gatekeepers, and you had to go for specific time slots, and all the constraints were so different that when this just got opened up, essentially a popular YouTube channel doesn't look anything like what a popular TV show used to look like, or even looks like today. And so, what is the sort of financial equivalent of that? I actually, frankly, don't think we've really seen it yet, but the potential is there for sure.
So the other question is, if you look at all the existing DeFi projects, basically we need to have different type of, let's say it's a Ethereum project, we need to have different type of ERC20 tokens to basically create that business model of DeFi. So as the ICO boom went away, is there a concern of the amount of asset for DeFi is becoming less? Or like, what do you think about the tokenized world, physical world asset? Do you feel that's future growth for DeFi? Or it's more about creating new on-chain asset that basically providing these as the products for DeFi to work on?
I think both. But in terms of timing, I think like crypto native or digital native come first, and then because there's some legacy in traditional world, so you need some time for them to do the digitization or tokenization. After all the things have become tokenized, the DeFi timing come.
One of my favorite things about Uniswap, and full disclosure, we invested in Uniswap, the company, is that, so back during the ICO boom, right, everyone was talking about how there'd be an ERC20 token for every protocol, and this would be how protocols monetize, and people just use, you have to go buy this token in order to use this protocol, and it turned out that was a terrible user experience, as well as in many other ways the technology itself being ahead of its skis. But if someone does say, you've got to get this ERC20 protocol token to use this protocol, that's very inconvenient, typically, but what's funny is Uniswap just lets you sort of ignore that. It lets you abstract it away. So in some sense, Uniswap makes it a lot easier for you to have a token model, and in some way the token's able to capture value because the overhead is reduced, and so when you sort of end up with just the bare economics. So I think as the infrastructure gets better at sort of layering a good user interface on top of what these sort of underlying economics are, I think we may see this original vision of there being a lot more tokens out there that work and that makes sense coming to fruition, but on-chain rather than as something that a user actually has to think about.
Yes, so if you think about this DeFi application built on chain, there's a philosophical question to ask, which is if you think about MakerDAO, the importance of MakerDAO and Ethereum. If MakerDAO suddenly passed away, nothing happened to Ethereum chain. But Ethereum passed away, MakerDAO passed away. So I think there's supposed to be a very two-way type importance to each other, but now we see one way, which is if Ethereum passed away, MakerDAO passed away. So this philosophical question leaves a lot of issue, which I think I don't even know what the answer is. And also speaking of lack of, play in DeFi, lack of asset, it's not only about DeFi, it's still the fundamental issue we have in blockchain. Where is the application? People are still looking for application for the use cases, but we're so early that we're still in the infrastructure level everyone is making a lot of promise and new technology, and now people are talking about adoption, but we don't even have a road. How can you have a Lambo to drive like 100 miles on the road? So it's kind of ridiculous. People think and move faster than they should be. So, I mean, liquidity will come, but the day has not come yet.
Yeah, I agree. I think what's been mentioned already is this concept of sequencing, right? Traditional assets versus digitally native assets, and which will be tokenized and whether they're worth tokenizing. To me, it's just a matter of sequencing, right? I could see a world where physical assets are tokenized, but I don't see them coming first or even for a long while, right? Because obviously there's still huge technical problems to be solved, completely outside of the realm of blockchains. How do you maintain integrity between off-chain and on-chain asset? Tends to boil down to a hardware problem, right? That huge tech conglomerates have spent billions of dollars trying to solve already, and it's still not perfect. So we may get there eventually, but right now I think the best way to think about DeFi and what's going to get tokenized and transacted upon first, it's the long tail, right? It's the long tail of finance where assets don't have existing markets, and they need them. Those tend to be digitally native.
So nowadays, like Bitcoin become more and more dominant in the entire crypto space, right? So what's your take on this? Do you feel it's a good or bad thing for the overall industry or for DeFi specifically?
Is Bitcoin dominance good or bad for DeFi? I think it's pretty irrelevant. I think it's just a part of the market cycle. When you look at metrics like dominance, and I think Bitcoin is probably going to be the first entry point for mainstream investors to come into crypto. That's going to be true for quite a while, right? So I think it's more of a function of that rather than people stepping away from DeFi long term and saying, no, all we want is a store of value, right? I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, so in my opinion, I think Bitcoin story is 80% complete. So more and more people agree Bitcoin is an asset which has some, can interfere traditional world, which you can hedge during some specific events. But I think Bitcoin story is so boring right now to talk about. Like during Bitcoin boom, the previous two months, no one talks about ICO or smart contract, which is kind of sad because it was because of ICO and smart contract which brought up the 2017 bull market. How can you forget the origin of the last bull market and just go back to the story of 2008? In some way, it's kind of immature. Shows a lot of people still don't understand what's going on with blockchain. There's a complete other side of blockchain, which is a data play, which you provide data query and provide all sorts of APIs to provide applications which the general people will use but never experience blockchain itself. But it's kind of funny to see people experience something that always go back to the story which created in 2008. ICO and smart contract are such good innovations that people have to spend more time explore, especially smart contract contingency and automatic execution features has a lot of business implementations for SaaS and all sorts of things. So I think there are different stories yet to be explored apart from Bitcoin.
That is a genuinely hot take. I would probably say, and partly I think I'm maybe more of a Bitcoin nerd than a lot of DeFi people, is that I think I would say there are two sort of separate things going on, but it's interesting that they remain separate because Bitcoin has been sort of a slow success story over the past few years since the ICO boom and crash. Generally, I think it's where you're still seeing more retail interest. It's where you're still seeing more institutional interest. It's where generally, I think it's proven to be relatively strong. I think the store of value thesis is quite strong for Bitcoin. That said, what's happening, you're completely on the other end of town. you have all the building is happening on Ethereum. Technically, what's going on Ethereum is much more interesting, and that includes people building and developing decentralized finance. And so I think this is not sustainable, the sort of gap between these. And in fact, full disclosure again, we invested in Keep. I'm so glad we have all these great investments. A company called Keep came out this week with a proposal for a trustless pegged Bitcoin product on Ethereum. So a way to use BTC and DeFi on Ethereum. And I think something like that, some solution to that is almost inevitable, in part because BTC so far seems like better money. Seems like a good asset for, it would be great if we could take out CDPs against it, right? I think people generally would like to do that. It would be a useful ingredient in this, but not that ETH isn't. ETH is fantastic as well for it. But yeah, right now isn't technically possible.
I personally think it's a short-term phenomenon. It's not a trend. If you go back to like the birth of the Bitcoin, the real trend is the dominant is decreasing, and in the long term, we need to make the data more accurate. For example, we can expect in the 2 years later or 3 years later, maybe we can add on like Libra token, so the Bitcoin dominant will decrease. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I tend to think Bitcoin dominance is kind of a funny metric. It builds in an assumption that things are happening on like similar timelines, which doesn't seem like what if you actually looked at what's happening in the world, like that's how it's actually playing out. Like Bitcoin, yes, it's a lot less capable in many ways than Ethereum, but I think that simplicity actually has allowed it to get to the adoption that it has, and it's kind of hitting this part of its growth path where really people say it's boring, but actually the work to make it a real global asset is happening sort of almost outside of the technology. A lot of it is happening outside of the technology. And so as that happens, we would expect a certain kind of a curve to emerge for that. Whereas Ethereum is just, way earlier on that curve. And then, I kind of, it's kind of funny because like when you talk about the ICO boom, it's like that to me is just this anomaly, like this kind it's like you're trying to make a general statement based on like bubble economics or bubble behavior, and so I sort of see like what we're seeing right now as kind of it's a funny measure to compare these two, but like Bitcoin is a lot more mature in terms of its global adoption than Ethereum is, and if you expect these things to have this kind of like network style exponential growth over time, like it's not weird at all that the ratio today is what it is.
Great. So I guess we'll leave a few minutes for the audience. So anyone have any questions you would like to ask? We're gonna have probably like 2 questions.
So Jack, one of the things you mentioned earlier was that the kind of lending and borrowing kind of ecosystem in China is very, very different from, I guess let's say the West. Right. Could you elaborate on that a little bit further and kind of talk about how you think are those going to kind of come together at some point, and how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, so during consensus, I was in a meeting between Celsius and the lending platform we invested. The deal was basically Celsius have a lot of stablecoin, and they have lack of BTC. So people in the Western world tend to trade more, so they borrow BTC to trade. And we need, in China, we need borrow stablecoin to create electricity for miners. So the deal was to have a collaboration, basically supply BTC and stablecoin to each other. But it's funny in crypto, projects are very arrogant. They never want to work with each other. I mean, you see all the partnerships, but how many partnerships are real partnerships? Like in traditional finance, things are not very fragmented because the government oversees everything. That's how to make a massive production line. But in crypto, every project has their own rule of doing things. Even for lending and borrowing, you have different set of things, different set of use of tokens. So it's very difficult to work with each other. So I mean, I think the best way to go is to work with each other because people tend to have their regional advantage over others. So this is what I think people in crypto should think more about.
Has anyone on stage ever considered tokenizing their fund, and if not, why?
No, that totally, you're right, we're full of shit, aren't we? Because none of us are tokenize a fund, would we?
I think the short answer there is just paperwork, right? Like and the kind of investors that we have to sell to, like, would not be into that, at least in today's world, right? So, you know, it'll be interesting to see when that starts to happen. I suspect that it'll probably happen ground up a little bit more than top down. You know, things like SET are, you know, I sort of see this future where, you know, I think Uniswap is a kind of an example of this as well, but like basically you have this way of adding liquidity to whatever trading strategy that someone else has implemented out there. And if you think about that, I mean, putting money into a hedge fund or a venture fund is essentially the same thing. So I would suspect that that would sort of happen, you know, kind of ground up, and it'll get to a certain point where then people will be like, well, how come your fund isn't a smart contract?
I heard some like the real estate fund is trying to do some the idea to realize the idea, because the venture fund is not a standardized financial product, but real estate may be more easy to do the products first.
Yeah, I mean, I would say you're talking to the most wrong type of fund possible to tokenize. The reason for that is because you know, I think one of the key benefits of tokenization here is liquidity, or at least that's the value proposition for investors and be able to transact in secondary markets. But you're looking at long-term investors all on stage right now, right? And the liquidity mismatch there just means that tokenization has a much smaller value proposition for you know, the time horizon that we're looking at. And the types of investors that we're looking to bring into our funds, right? You know, Ken mentioned SET. I think SET is a great example, right, of where this should materialize, which is things that look much more like ETFs, things that are meant to trade in real time and be priced in real time, not things that are meant to percolate for 5 to 10 years before you can actually put a price on something.
I guess I'll have one last question. So what do you think is the biggest missing piece in DeFi or in the entire crypto industry?
I think it's people's attitude. I don't think we have issue with technology. It's just less scams and more hardworking that will make everyone happier.
I have an extremely specific answer, but I can't tell you. You're all gonna have to wait for my paper that's gonna come out soon.
I think more and more token holders, or more and more like crypto believers.
I'll kind of go back to some of the questions from the earlier panel. Like I feel like we don't have great narratives on who the users are at all. I think actually your kind of comment about how in China here are the borrowers and here's exactly what they're doing is like actually like really revealing, because that you can look at and say, okay, I can understand how big this market is and you know what this is going to grow to, and if I get this much fee, then you know, et cetera, you can do this valuation thing. In DeFi today, it's like, is it really just like 10 ETH whales out there that are like powering this whole thing? Like, do we really know? So you know, I would suggest to some of the product teams out there, like. Someone was saying that like, oh, people are actually willing to give us their personal information. Like, I think that you know there definitely is a crowd in the world that you know is all privacy and is using this thing because they don't want to do that. But I would wager to guess that the crowd that is not in that sort of mindset is probably like 6 to 7 times bigger. And so really kind of like leveraging your access to those customers today and understanding what they're doing and turning that into a narrative about what market you're going after, you know, that feels like it's missing.
I guess let's give a round of applause.
Thanks so much. Thank you to our VC panel. We will only have a 5-minute break because we have 3 more presentations. If you would like to hang around, there will be people speaking from MakerDAO, Compounds and Electric Capital. So just 5-minute break and then we're back to presentations and then there's some more time for networking afterwards. Thank you.